What's up, guys? Welcome to this series, All Stakes Mentor. The idea behind this series is it reproduces a format that used to be popular quite a while back, and the format is very simply coach rails a student playing and gives commentary on his play. For some reason, this particular format doesn't really seem to appear at any training site currently. It's almost as if it's been forgotten by time, and yet some of the old schoolers, this is exactly how they learn to play the game, watching these type of training videos. So we're going to have an entire series dedicated to the concept, which is I'm going to be railing the pre-recorded action of various students. The reason why this series is called All Stakes Mentor is because we're going to be starting at 10NL, we're going to be finishing up at the mid to high stakes games. So I imagine that should be plenty by way of introduction. Let's get started with the action. As you can see, we are playing two tables of 10NL Zoom, and given that we're playing in euros, this is probably going to be stars.eu. This should be reasonably similar at least to stars.com. There's going to be a couple of main differences. Obviously the game should be slightly softer, but the rake should be slightly higher. Okay, so on table 2, on the right hand side, we have 6-9 offsuit, complete in the small blind. That's completely fine. We want to be leading this flop. Might not be so good against the red tag. You can see we have the key there at the bottom of the screen. We have red equals reg. So this is not the kind of guy you really have to be completing 6-9 offsuit against in a small blind, but certainly against unknowns, against recreationals, it might be an okay option. This turn on table 2 looks like a relatively straightforward check call. You can of course play bet, but normally the standard option here is just going to be to check and see what happens on the river. So this is not a terrible option, but the standard option there is to check call. Having said that, the hand does benefit from some measure of protection here on this turn. So plan should be to play bet, check if we follow this line. Perfectly good check there on the river. And presumably it should be a check fold against a float bet here, but it's going to be relatively close to being a check call. But this type of hand, it will be a check fold. Obviously we hope the villain checks back, and we will have some kind of check calling range. It's usually going to be the weaker Queen X type stuff that we didn't triple barrel. Maybe very occasionally a good 9X, but it's not going to be the type of 9X that we have. So our kicker was too weak in that example. Just going to rewind slightly. We want to see the King 9 offsuit hand. So table 1, we isolate the King 9 offsuit against an MP limper. I generally recommend we c-bet very aggressively against limp callers. So although we don't have super fantastic equity or backdoor potential on the Jack 8-5, and it's not like we have nothing. You know, we have an overcard, we've got some backdoor straights going on there. But generally speaking, even with nothing, I would tend towards c-betting very aggressively against the limp callers. They tend towards folding in the region of about 50% of the time when facing c-bet OOP. Whereas if you compare that to a scenario where someone is the cold caller, let's say we have a reg in the blinds, he's the cold caller, how much will he fold to a c-bet OOP on the flop? Probably closer to 40%. In other words, limp callers do fold more frequently to c-bets when OOP compared to, let's just say, an average fold to c-bets out of the population when playing as the cold caller. So probably want to be firing a c-bet on this flop. And perfectly fine to fold against the lead there. Table 2, we open raise the jacks, we check back the flop, that's fine. We should be looking to probably 2-barrel for value right now. It's not that likely villain has an ace. We'll see what the river card is, of course. Hero fires, villain folds, that's fine. We want to also make sure we get tags on players. I'm not sure if Hero tagged the villain that limped when we had the King 9 offsuit. Obviously, as soon as we see someone do that, we want to instantly be getting a color tag. We have to be very careful in these spots with the 9-3 offsuit. Really want to look who's behind. And in this case, we have a tight reg in the small blind playing 16-13, but then we have a lag in the big blind. This guy, if I can read the HUD, has 11.4% 3-bet. He's playing 28-23. So basically with a lag in the big blind, probably not the greatest spot to open the 9-3 offsuit. So it's good to push the button RFI range quite wide. We still need to base it on who's in the blinds though. We don't just want to be opening trash hands without a good reason, although small blind was on the tight side as we saw. So another guy that's limped, we don't get a tag on him, we just move on to the next hand. We should be getting a tag on that opponent straight away. That way, when we see that guy again in a few orbits time and he's in our big blind, we're going to recognize him, he's going to have the color tag. 5-9 is okay as a check back on table 2. It should be a turn call. We have a gut shot, so that's going to be too tight there. So basically, why is it okay to check back the flop here? Well, we have a weak draw, so it's not that important that we build the pot, but we don't want to be folding a gut shot against a pro bet on the turn. And of course, we don't get the direct pot odds. We don't even necessarily have the implied odds in terms of hitting a hand, but what we should think about this turn situation as is a float. I.e., villain could just be stabbing with a pro bet, maybe just has any 2 cards still at this stage. We have the ability to call the turn and take away the pot on the river. The fact that we can sometimes hit a straight, which is very likely to be the best hand, is just a huge bonus here. It makes it more profitable for us. So that's why we select this type of hand as a call against a turn pro bet, with the intention of bluffing the river if check 2. So this is an overly tight fold here. Of course, not a very big deal. This is not going to be make or break in terms of generating profit win rate here, but if you look at the sizing as well, villain's betting 40% pot, less than 40% pot in fact, so that's just going to be too tight there on the turn to fold that kind of holding. So we call there, we stab the river in position. Pretty easy open with the king jack. We seem to have tightish reg in the big blind here, who folds. Pocket 7s on table 2 should be playable. This guy, we want to get a tag on him. This time we do get the tag. We just need to be a bit more consistent. Very large ISO raise there. Not really sure what that's about. And we make the fold. That's fine. Let's have a look at the color scheme. So we have light blue is fish, not full stack. Blue is a fish. So this is already not a very good color system. The reason is that a fish could potentially rebuy if he wanted to at any point. So what do we have to change? The tag of that player after he rebuys. We've got light blue fish and then we've got blue fish. It's probably better to have one color for a fish and another color for a very weak fish. And I think that's what Hero has. So we've got blue for the fish and then we've got violet for the whale. So those are the really bad guys, presumably. So we should have more than one designation for the fish, really. And that's what Hero has. But I don't think there's a point changing the color based on the stack size, because that can obviously change from hand to hand. Ace Queen obviously want to open, 8-5 of clubs. It's honestly fine to fold these kind of hands in the big blind. Have to remember that we are under increased rake pressure in these games, so we don't have to defend the big blind as wide as popular opinion might suggest. On table 2, we open raise the Ace Queen of Spades. We decide to check back to 7-5-5, and that's certainly reasonable in a vacuum. However, if we look at our opponent, we should immediately notice he is folding 55% of the time to a c-bet on the flop. So do I like this check back? Not really. This guy's folding too much on the flop. We should be firing a continuation bet here. So this isn't a mistake with default strategy. This is a mistake regarding not using HUD stats in this case. As played, definitely delayed c-bet the turn. It doesn't really need to be that large. Half pot's fine with the intention of checking back the river. Although we will fire a second barrel on a club and turn a hand into a bluff. Table 1, we open raise to Queen 9. This is a very, very standard check call spot on the flop. We have a second pair and a backdoor spade draw, so very straightforward check call there. Plan should be to check call most turns. On the 8 of diamonds, we can probably find a fold here. Villain decides to check back, so we find ourselves in a relatively interesting situation. We obviously have to check the river. Question is what happens if villain bets. And it's probably going to be a marginal call, but probably doesn't matter too much whether we make the call or not. I think we definitely have to call with stuff like Queen Jack, King Queen, etc. And we might think that maybe it doesn't matter too much whether we have Queen 9 or we have King Queen, but it does actually matter in these games because your opponent will always have the tendency to mistakenly bet something like Queen Jack, even though maybe it doesn't make too much sense. They will sometimes bet hands like that. So what that means is our bluff catchers are not really equivalent. It is important, strength of our kicker. I think Queen 9 is whatever. But certainly, any kind of ace-x hand, it would definitely be a check call if we didn't bet ourselves a value, and our stronger queens definitely. This Queen X probably doesn't matter too much what we do, and I think anything weaker, it's probably going to be a fold. That's, of course, if villain bets. We don't know if it's going to bet yet. Definitely a check from our perspective, though. And villain checks back. That's the best outcome. Table 2, we have the 10-9. We open raise. This looks like a good spot to bet 1/3 pot, and that's exactly what Hero does here. So it's basically a protection bet because we don't want to play a check call line. This turn, however, we should feel very comfortable just check defending here on the turn. It's not going to be a check fold at this stage. And we don't mind if villain bets small. That just makes it easier for us in this case. So we want to be check calling here. Our hand's not strong enough to be raising. Check again on the river. And we're probably just going to be looking at villain's bet sizing. I don't really think the action on table 1 makes any sense whatsoever. It's true that small blind might be a weak reg. He's playing 29-18 so far, but that doesn't mean that we want to be raising 8-5 offsuit preflop in the spot. We almost certainly don't have an equity edge against him. So we may as well just keep the stack to pot ratio high, check back, use our post-flop edge against this player. Raising is pretty meaningless in this spot and is not going to increase our EV. So not a very good pre-flop decision. As mentioned, if we do ISO, we should probably c-bet the flop a lot. Villain decides to donk bet. I think we have to peel at least once here. We have the gut shot. Let's just also see what happened on table 2. I think it went check-check. We'll find out. Yeah, villain checks back and we win. Just to call here, we don't want to be raising 8 high in this spot. Generally, the way the population plays, we want to tend towards raising for protection, vulnerable made hand. So that could be something like ace-4 in this spot, or a 7x, or ace-3, something like that. So vulnerable pairs. This is not a vulnerable pair, this is a draw. It's a kind of hand that benefits from retaining its positional advantage. So we really just want to be calling in the spot. Raising, not the best option here. So we bink a 5. And I'd probably just check now. We might be good. We also might catch our 6 on the river. So I would just check and hope to get to showdown. So table 2, this guy is folding too much to 3-bet. So this is perfectly reasonable to 3-bet the Jack-6 offsuit here. It's folding 63 so far. I think with 3k hands, what I'd like to see is for Hero to bring up the HUD and actually look at villain's fold to 3-bet specifically in the small blind to see if it's higher or lower in that spot. But assuming we don't do that, it should be high enough where it's at least reasonable. We check back, villain leads. We have complete garbage here, we should be giving up. This is not the kind of spot where we want to be chasing a bad situation. At least I assume that's what happened. I'm really not sure what Hero's thinking about in this spot. This is pretty much handover from the moment we get cooled and completely miss the flop. Garbage flop. We check back. Villain leads. Okay, it's a strange size lead, but we have complete garbage here. Even thinking about defending in this spot suggests potential issue with thought process. It's a very straightforward fold here. Can't imagine what Hero's thinking about right now. Yeah, this is just spew, absolutely. Doesn't matter whether Hero picks up the pot or not, that's not going to be the right decision there. I wonder what it is that Hero's actually looking at. Did we miss something in the pop-ups there? Maybe we did. Okay, fold c-bet to raise on the turn is 67. Okay, so that's what Hero's looking at. Couple of issues though. I don't think this is for 3-bet pots. And 67, that's suspiciously likely to be 2 of 3. In fact, it says there 2 of 3, right? So it is 2 of 3. Because when Hero hovers his cursor over that stat. There we go. 2 of 3, so there's no sample, and this is apparently for single raised pots anyway, as far as I can tell. Best case scenario, it's an amalgamation of single raised and 3-bet pots, but I'm guessing it's probably for single raised. So yeah, this is not a good decision here. It's not a strong enough read to be making this kind of raise. Pocket 8's on table 1, that's a standard open. Table 2, we should always be aware of the fact that we have a weaker player in the big blinds. We might be able to find an excuse to play something like King 5 offsuit. So we face a smallish 3-bet. This guy's the blue tag. He's going to be a weaker player. It's going to be a pretty straightforward call. Obviously hoping to spike an 8. We miss. Only question now is whether we have to peel against the C-bet. If he fires, I would say no. I would just go ahead and hero fold. He's not 3-betting that much. He's sizing up slightly on the flop. And he's 3-betting against our, it was either EP or MP open. So I think that's very reasonable to not float the flop there. So thinking about opening, we fold the 7-9 and the Queen Deuce we fold as well. So it's good to make sure we're getting these decisions right. So we can see on table 2, we have a whale in the big blind. And we have a huge nit in the small blind. This guy's playing 15-7. So basically, he's not even in the picture. He's got 3.9% 3-bet. He's playing 15-7. And we've got a guy in the big blind who's a huge whale. So table 2, this is a very easy open raise. There's absolutely no reason why we would not open the button here. This is exactly what we're looking for. We've got 2 weak players in the blind. We've got a huge nit in the small blind. And we've got a huge whale in the big blind. This is perfect for us. We absolutely want to be raising here. I don't understand how Hero can look at this spot and decide that it's going to be a fold. On table 1, as far as I can tell, we probably made the right decision. Because although there's a fish in the big blinds, we've got a 28-23 with 12% 3-bet or 11.5% 3-bet in the small blind. So that's a good decision. Table 2 is not a good decision, however. So as we can see, those button decisions are very dynamic. It's going to depend heavily on who's in the blinds. If we have 2 weaker players in the blinds, it's a very good argument for just opening any 2 cards. You know, if one guy's a nit and the other one's a huge whale, or if they're both nits, or if they're both blue tags in the case of Hero's coloring system. Very compelling argument for just opening everything on the button. So we see there on table 2, we've got a 47-8. So this is exactly the kind of guy we want to be targeting. Let's just see that again on table 2. So earlier in the session, Hero decided he was going to play 9-5 offsuit with a red tag in the big blind. So that's a reg. But now 7-5, which is kind of similar, maybe even a slightly better hand. I mean, it's certainly more connected. But now we have a blue tag in the big blinds. This is an obvious spot to complete in the small blind. Hero's deciding to fold. So we can see some issue there with these basic pre-flop open raising decisions. We've probably incorrectly limped the 9-5 offsuit at the beginning of the session. Now we're incorrectly folding the 7-5 offsuit because there's a blue tag. Table 1, we want to get a tag on this villain ASAP. He is open limping from MP. Should basically be the first thing we do is just put a tag on that guy, but instead we've just fast folded. So you can see we're only getting a tag on maybe 30% of the people who are actually open limping, so the tagging system is not full efficiency at this stage. Another guy, let's get a tag. Almost got a tag, and then we decided we're gonna 3-bet instead. And now the tag has been long forgotten. Oh, I think we did get a tag. Alright, good. Somewhat belated, I thought that tag wasn't coming, but it did in the end. It might seem monotonous, but you know, especially if we're playing stars.eu, the player pool is going to be a bit smaller. It's not as ridiculous to imagine we're going to get a tag on everyone. I mean, probably won't, but certainly the guys who are playing consistently, we should have tags on them. It's going to make our decision making a lot more nuanced, dynamic, and most importantly, plus EV. So we open raise the ace-jack, perfectly fine. We have a whale in the big blinds. We want to be calling there against the smallest 3-bet. 6 is probably just a complete. I don't really like ISOing these hands too much OP. I mean, it's not bad, but you may as well just see a cheap flop there. Ace-Jack is going to be a call. Hero needs to stop raising draws in position. It's not usually the best thing to do. So basic idea here is that we want to be check raising good draws OOP, but in position, the way we exploit the population currently is by tending towards flattening our draws and raising vulnerable made hands. So here we have a draw. It's a kind of hand that definitely wants to retain its positional advantage, especially when playing against the purple tag, because how much fold equity do we really think we have here? I mean, we don't know how much fold equity we have. Maybe we have more than we think, but it's not the kind of guy where you imagine he's going to be making some big laydowns against a raise. He's got a purple tag for a reason. I guess on table 2 we should c-bet, but not a great situation to be in. I would have preferred to see the small blind complete pre-flop. King Queen, open raise and MP, that's fine and very standard. 6-9 is going to be a fold. Ace-8 on table 1, possibly going to be playable here. King Queen definitely an open raise, and Ace-8 definitely an open raise. We have a reg in the big blind on table 2, playing 22-18 so far, and he folds. Ace-King, want to be squeezing here to about €1. The Euro 10's fine. Relatively tight opener. He decides to call, and then we have a weaker player in the middle. Although he just looks like a tight reg. He has a blue tag. He doesn't have a full stack though, so yeah, he's definitely on the weaker side. We don't want to be c-betting here. We squeezed, we've missed a flop. So yeah, the c-bet's probably going to be a mistake. It's nice and small at least, so that minimizes the impact of the mistake, but there's nothing wrong with your check folding here. We face a 3-bet on table 2. So let's just have a quick look at the guy's stats. 4.4. So this guy is really not 3-betting very much. So 4-betting is probably not going to be the right option here. But we do get an insanely good price on the call. So I might be tempted to just peel here and see if we can catch some kind of miracle flop, especially given that we're playing 130 BB effective. So calling's probably correct based on the sizing. For this guy, we expect him to be pretty strong. It's not a big problem just to fold here pre-flop. With the price, I would call, however, and we're not really going to be messing around post-flop. We know the guy's probably tight, given his 4.4% 4-bet range. His VPIP PFR is 15-12. So when we miss the flop, we're just going to be folding straight away to his continuation bet. Again, I don't know really what Hero's thinking about at this stage. I'm guessing he's looking at that fold c-bet to raise stat, but that's for single raised pots. That's not what this is. This is a 3-bet pot. Let's just revisit that. What's Hero looking at? Fold to raise after flop c-bet, 5 of 8. So yeah, this guy is folding slightly too much to flop raises. Slightly too much in terms of the auto profit threshold, because suddenly in the single raise pot, we start to generate auto profit if that number is above 55. So this guy's definitely a good target to check raise in general. Like, that's correct. The concern here is that Hero is consulting what appears to be a single raised stat. So this is a single raised pot on the flop. So I don't think the information is going to be good here. The other thing as well is, if it's even close, then we're going to want to have some kind of equity. We don't really have anything here. Maybe Hero's going to fold. We don't know. He definitely raises, but he's thinking about it. You can see, you can kind of sense that from the cursor movements. So this is the second spew of the session based on consulting the wrong stat, and also a stat where the sample size is probably too small anyway. And the third kind of issue with those two problems is the equity. It's one thing if we've got some marginal equity here, but this is literally one of the worst hands. Well, it's maybe not one of the worst, but you can see it doesn't have a lot going for it. I mean, I suppose it's got a backdoor gut shot, but at the end of the day, we don't have a diamond. It's pretty weak as far as backdoor equity goes. So we have to be very confident in our read. The less potential we have, the more confident we need to be in the direct auto-profit nature of our bet. And we don't have enough information to be confident enough where this check raise is going to be a good idea. Anyway, we brick on the turn. We check. Plan is obviously to give up, but villain checks back. And hero decides to take a stab on the river. So I think this is just targeting the wrong player type. Stop and go lines are relatively successful. May not be as successful after check raising and taking a stop and go line. But with this particular scenario, the unknown variable here is we're dealing with someone who's probably tighter than he should be. So this guy is getting to the flop with a range that's probably stronger than we'd like it to be, especially given that he's just called a check raise. This guy's probably going to be somewhat reluctant to fold, or at least we don't know how reluctant he's going to be to fold. We just know that he was probably kind of overly strong to begin with. So this is just not the right spot to be bluffing the river. And it's not that it's guaranteed to be minus EV. Maybe it's going to be a plus EV bluff. It depends on how often villain's folding. But what we can say is that we have a very low level of confidence that this is going to be a plus EV river bluff, so it's not worth investing 35 big blinds over. So I don't like this play, even though I think it could be plus EV. I think we're risking too much given the level of confidence we have regarding the profitability of that line. 5-6 of clubs. Probably want to c-bet here. Somewhat vulnerable pair given that it's so low. Villain fold, so that's fine. So we have a fish in the big blind on table 1. Playing 25-8 so far over 2k. This guy's folding too much to 3-bet 2 opens, so that was kind of a pretty fast fold there, given that the guy's probably folding too much on the button and we have a fish behind. So there are some stats the hero's not even checking, which are actually relevant to his decision. So we ISO raise the queens here, pretty good flop for it. Nice big bet sizing there from hero. We're playing against the blue tag as well, so realistically we're not going to be folding queens at any point, especially not given the stack depth of 60 BB or so. So we have a weaker player in the big blind there, so we can play a wide range from the small blind in that case on table 1. Table 2. Not 100% sure what the big blind is here. Maybe a weak reg. 6s probably wants to be folded on table 1 right now from this position. Can probably defend 7s or 8s plus, but not 6s. So I recommend the fold. But this guy does have 79% fold to 4-bet. That is a relevant stat to check. And the sample's like 10k. I'm going to go ahead and say this is a very reasonable decision there by hero. Well spotted with the 79% fold to 4-bet. That's a good exploitative decision. We weren't thinking about calling 6s anyway. The guy's folding way too much to 4-bets. So that's a nice spot there, and that's an example of good stat usage on the HUD. Ace 3 is ideally going to be a 3-bet in the spot, but it does play fine as a call as well. I mean, we're playing against the blue tag. We've got 2 purple guys behind as well, so whatever we do is going to be fine in the spot. Again, we haven't connected that well with the texture. We don't want to be firing a c-bet here. It's true we do have the backdoor spades, but you've got to remember as well that it's a Jack-9-6, so there's a lot of connectivity there. This kind of thing, i.e. getting check raised, is going to happen enough where it just doesn't really make sense to fire a c-bet there. So here is probably c-betting a little bit too aggressively three-way despite missing the flops. That's the second time we've seen that in this session. So Queen 9 in the big blind, this is going to be potentially a call. In fact, you can see the range there in the bottom right, big blind versus cutoff, got Queen 9 there. We pick up the gutter, so it's not a great flop, but it's enough where we should be check calling rather than check folding. This is not something that I've ever said to Hero should be a good idea, unless we have a stat that could be the 71% fold to donk bet stat there, in which case, again, another good spot there by Hero. I'm not sure if that stat was actually consulted, but if it was, that might be a good decision. That's the only reason why I'd expect Hero to donk bet there. It's certainly not something we would have discussed as being a standard line or anything like that. Standard play there would be to check call. If the turn goes check check, we'll probe bet the river. But if you look at the bottom left of the HUD panel, I think the pink stat's probably donk, and then the dark pink stat or purple is fold to donk, fold to flop donk. So it looked like that opponent was just falling way too much to donk bet. So a pretty good spot there if that's the case. So this guy looks questionable on table 1. He should open raise. He doesn't have the full stack. He gets a purple tag. That's fine. Doesn't mean we have to defend with the kind of hand that we had. So we just elect to fold in that case, which is reasonable. Nines is obviously going to be an open in the spot. We have 2 blue tags in the blinds. We open raise. We do want to c-bet here if we get the opportunity. Again, probably small sizing. We're talking about 25 cents, something like that. So yeah, this is a good bet sizing by Hero. This is definitely going to be the correct decision. We don't really want to be giving a free card there. We could easily be good with nines. It's somewhat vulnerable. We've got 2 blue tags here on table 2. First one fold, second one we definitely want to play here. Got a suited king. We've got a weaker player in the big blind. So definitely okay just to be using large bet sizings across flop, turn, and river here and just hoping to generate action. That's completely fine. We get a call, so we want to be betting pretty big on the turn. Just trying to get as much in as possible. So probably too small realistically. Want to be betting like €1 there probably. At least €2 on the river. €2.10's okay. So probably could have eked out a little bit more value in this hand. Could have sized up slightly there. It will add up in the long run, but essentially Hero has the right idea. Bet, bet, bet against a weaker player. Let's go back and revisit this hand on table 1. Pre-flop we decided to 3-bet, which looks very reasonable. We have ace-jack. It's big blind versus button. It's a weaker player. He has 67 effective to start the hand. That's not a good flop. Game plan really should be to check fold here. And Hero checks. Villain checks back. After villain checks back, we probably want to be 2-barreling and turning a hand into a bluff right now because we can fold out stuff like ace-queen, ace-king by the river if villain even has those hands. There's no reason why we wouldn't bluff on this run out. Just want to bet like 180 or something on the river. So this is a good principled decision by Hero here. The river bluff's going to work probably around 50% of the time, which means it's also going to fail about 50% of the time. But with that sizing that we used, it only needs to work about 40%, and it's going to work about 50%. So it's better than just check folding. It's going to be more profitable. But we still have to get used to the idea that that line's going to fail a lot. So that can be psychologically tough for some players in the 3-bet pot. There's a decent chunk of our stack gone there on a failed bluff if villain does decide to call. But we still want to be double barreling there aggressively in that spot. Another spot where this villain's falling too much to 4-bets. Now here I spotted this before, he's spotting it again, so he's got good fundamentals here for this scenario. I don't know why he didn't 4-bet though, like he's looking at the stat. You know, we obviously have a reasonable hand for the 4-bet, and he just elects not to pull the trigger. So, somewhat disappointing given that he actually checked the stat. Villain's falling way too much, and we didn't get the 4-bet through. As soon as villain's falling more than about 58% of the time, certainly if it's 60 or above, we should be 4-betting very aggressively. That was a good spot for it. Here I looked at the stat, but didn't pull the trigger. There aren't too many regs who are going to be folding 79% of the time to a 4-bet, so anything above 60 is good enough usually. I would be tempted to play there on table 2. So you have 6-8. If you just follow the action, and again it's going to be opponent-based decision. You have a huge whale, and a fish tags along. You obviously get a great price there to try and hit 2-pair, trip, straight, whatever. I would have looked to defend in that scenario. So villain awareness is reasonable at the moment. We have at least this tagging system, but it's not as good as it could be. We're not as aware as we should be regarding the types of opponents we're playing against. But it's not like here is showing zero awareness either. He's putting some tags on quite a lot of players. He is spotting some of the stats, but not always utilizing the stats, sometimes utilizing incorrect stats. So we're not at level 0, but there is still some improvement that could be done in these areas. Queen 10, open raise from the cutoff, and ace 4. Again, 3-bet or fold's fine. I think it's 3-bet in the ranges. Definitely have to play though, it's against the blue tag. This guy also wants a blue tag. He just min 3-bet, so that guy should immediately get a blue tag. Are we going to see that? Yep, he gets a purple tag. That's fine as well. Whale, probably just as good. We want to be raising here. I mean, we know this guy's not very good. We have aces up. We're probably good here realistically. Let's put in a raise to like $1 or €1. Jack 10, nearly always going to be playable. Just want to be calling here. It's not a great spot. It's a kind of tight half-stack player. A recreational tags along in the big blind. If he's checked around to us, we'll make a small stab here, hopefully. 30 cents. It's just something you can do with any 2 cards. So here misses that. And now he should be folding the turn. Even though he picks up a gut shot, villain's leading 3-way. The flush is completed. So it's a good spot to be just giving up. Could have made a small flop stab there, especially with 2 overs though. Table 2 want to be raising. Weaker player, probably have the best hand. Maybe we should even be playing for stacks there. Ace Queen, we open raise, top heads up kicker. Probably want to be firing continuation bet here. I think it's slightly too strong to be checking in the spot. Checking, we might do that with Queen Jack or maybe King Queen. But Ace Queen against the blue tag. This is a missed value bet here on the flop. We should have been c-betting. Turn and river, we want to try and compensate as much as we can now with large bet sizing for value. Very easy value bet on the river. I'd try and bet kind of large here if we can. We're still potentially falling to a raise, but right now there's plenty of worse hands that can be calling against a double barrel. Yep, okay, great. I think on that note, that's a good spot to end the session. So we'll be continuing in the next part of All Stakes Mentor. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next part of the series.